Any thoughts on why some people see light and some people will see Jesus or a religious figure? Have you had any revelations of what people would consider a hellish experience? You can sometimes feel in advance when there's some sort of a societal upheaval. And I have had other near-death experiencers say, we're kind of headed into some rocky times, and we're getting kind of the point where it's past being able to change some of that. Do you have any kind of a sense of that?
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better.
Hello, everybody. We are talking to Tricia Barker today. Hello, Trisha.
Hello.
We had such a great discussion as you shared your near-death experience in part 1, and I have so many questions now. We already covered some, but one of the things that we were talking about was religion and near-death experiences. And I was going to ask you if you had any thoughts on why some people see light and some people will see Jesus or a religious figure.
Yeah. So I wondered that myself. And I think for me, in my particular journey, I had experienced some abuse through a very Christian mom. And so, a lot of that abuse was very judgmental and like, well, none of this would be happening in your life if you were just with Jesus. And like, there was just a lot of condemnation in the name of Jesus. And so I had a kind of a personal block to that. I think at some level, that would have been just too much if all I would have gotten on the other side was, those messages. And then I was like, and I guess I have to now go be a part of a Christian church because I saw Jesus, I might have been confused. So for me, the highest good was to go into teaching. It really wasn't to start talking about my near-death experience right away. I spent many, many years, and I was calculating this. So it happened in 95. I went into teaching by 96, and I didn't tell my story till 2012 or so for the first time on the Bio channel, that I Survived series. And then I just kind of thought it would stay there for a long time and, not keep talking about it. So I think it's important to really examine what you want to do in life with this knowledge. And for me, what I wanted to do was help kids and to help students. And so it's much easier to use that light when you're in motion. And that's what I'll say. It's a lot harder in some ways to talk about it and to make it philosophical and to defend it. It's kind of love is meant to be in action. And love is meant to be, not for the picture of it, but, just for, oh, this person was hurting and I had to stay 3 hours and now I'm really tired and I'm going to eat some junk and go to bed, that kind of love that's hard sometimes. I mean, love is love in action.
And I love that because there is so much to love and a lot of it needs to be demonstrated. You as a teacher, I heard you say that with students, you ask yourself, what if I'm the divine appointment that they need? And basically, whether it's true or not, you say, it sounds like you will look at each student as if, you are what they need to really overcome something or to excel. Can you tell us that real quick?
Yeah, I think it's very important that all of us hold the highest good in our minds for others. You know how Emoto talks about water and how we send love, and good things to the water, then its crystalline structure changes. Well, think about our thoughts being sent to human beings, and if you are working with human beings, why in the world would you not want to be a part of their growth and their acceleration and their healing? And so I would always look at them in their highest possible timeline and potential. And that's what I would ask for guides and angels. And and their ancestors sometimes to come through and, just in a quick moment, it was like, if they need to hear something, let me say it. If it needs to be attached to the story, let me also say this. And maybe it didn't work for, everyone, but maybe there were some divine appointments, because I know there were, because it kind of seemed like in heaven, God was like, no, you have to go back for these particular students. Like, and it was like some were outlined, and I didn't know exactly who they'd be, but I just kind of got this feeling like, ooh, they might kill themselves, or the world might take a really dark turn, or, something might happen.
Can you imagine if everybody lived like that, and we thought about with every encounter we had, that this was some sort of a divine encounter, and we treated it as that? Man, the world would be just such an amazing place.
It would be a lot sweeter and a lot more open to that magic of the divine. That's another thing. People joke about consciousness, and they say, oh, like some people are just imagining this. Well, maybe their consciousness is literally playing with it, because I have this example of a friend who, she always sees like angel feathers, white feathers everywhere. She's always talking about it. I'm like, how many feathers can a person see? Like, we're walking together, feathers started falling around her, not me, like white feathers. And I'm like, her consciousness is playing around with that. So if we are creative beings, why in the world would we not create in the direction for ourselves and others, in a win-win scenario? Aren't we all supposed to be assertive? Like, I know that everyone has different styles. The aggressive communicator, is like win-lose. I'm going to win and you're going to lose. The assertive is I'm going to win and you're going to win. And I just find myself in that role. And the passive is I'm going to lose and you're going to lose. And then the passive aggressive is I'm lost and you're going to win. It's, like all flipped. But shouldn't we all be win-win? I mean, isn't that what we should all aim for?
Well, absolutely. And I think of that too, with how divided people get over religion and over politics and over beliefs, because you don't have to share those beliefs or those views, but we can still think that we can love the person.
Yeah.
And we're kind of missing that.
This might be an opportunity to really do a lot of healing too on the underlying causes that cause people to communicate in the way that they do. So some topics are like red hot for some people, and they can't communicate, from logic, or so I've seen. I feel like as a professor, I'm able to communicate largely most of the time. I have my triggers too, from a place of logic. But there are people who are so triggered by it, it's like they feel like it's life or death within them. And I think it's a past life wound oftentimes, that it's an unconscious wound that they're not realizing. I think, what I do, theta healing, Reiki workers, psychotherapy, there's all kind of ways to address these shadow parts of the self. But I think some people are so wounded that they're holding on to a particular belief system or politician, and technology has just got its hooks in people, and they feel like they're going to die. Some part of them is going to die if this issue is not resolved in the way they want it to be resolved. And that's something that needs to be cleared. It's like, no, you're not. You're going to be fine.
That's great advice. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you developed after your near-death experience. I heard you talk about this one time, and I tried to go back and find it before this interview because it really intrigued me. And you had of course, your near-death experience, but you also have developed a connection with the other side. And it was I'm not sure it was your father or grandfather, you were able to see some of what he has seen now that he's actually gone beyond a near-death experience.
Yes.
And stayed there.
Yes. Yeah. So when my dad passed in 2008, you just become heightened. Everyone talks about this who's lost a loved one, whether you get a premonition or you just get little signs along the way. they usually come. And he called me and said he had food poisoning, and I started driving because I just felt like it was off. I felt like there was going to be something else. And then I said, is there something else? And looked over and I saw a sign for a funeral home. And I was like, okay, be prepared. So it turns out near-death experiencers are pretty good guides to the other side. We do assist pretty well. And my dad and I laughed, said our goodbyes. And that month he had a brain tumor that was very fast growing. And when he left, the first indicator I got was from his parents. I had gone home just to take a quick nap and was going to go back early in the morning before I went to work. But I looked at first I had this vision, and his parents, my grandparents, were both there, and they said, we're here with him. We're going to take him on. Don't worry. It's okay. He's not alone, and because I didn't want him to die alone. Woke up, hospice had called several times. He had passed. And so I missed it. And yet I knew he was with his parents. And I started following him. So I was like, cool, well, I know what it's like. I'm going to just follow him into the afterlife. And every night I'd meditate and ask him and start asking him questions. And some things were a little more disturbing. Now, my dad was an untreated alcoholic, so there was like what I call 2 days of not really purgatory, but he called it universe school, but it was an extended life review where he got to see there is free will, and here's all the different varieties of every choice that you could have made. And so it was really just like consuming, how you had an effect on the world. And it wasn't meant to be shaming, but some things do kind of shame your soul in a way. You're like, oh, I could have done better. And I think he went through that for a time. And then he was welcomed in with great healing and love, and his parents were there. And it was really, like he said, it was like he'd been dropped off at school. They picked him back up, and he continued to learn in the higher education of the heavens, and wanted to learn from the Akashic records and, throughout all of time. And are there aliens? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And very beautiful. He has a love for music too. So he wanted to plot out his next life as well, because he's a soul that wants to come back.
It's interesting because a lot of people hear near-death experiencers say, we're not being judged. But you were just talking about guilt and shame, and it almost seems like there's rehabilitation. So it's not that people are getting off the hook. They are taking their experiences and learning from them.
Yes. But it's not as mean as people would want it to be. I think, when you've been the victim of a sociopath or a narcissist, you want to go, oh, I want them to feel everything I've felt. They do, but it's kind of like watching a movie. So it's like, they do, they get it. They feel everything that everyone has felt, but it's not, there's things you are missing about them if you lived in their shoes. And so it's comprehensive. And when you see it from that oneness perspective, you don't blame yourself. You don't blame others. You don't really blame anyone. You just go, oh, I didn't learn that yet. And so that's what it kind of feels like, is that soul's just going, ooh, I was a baby, or ooh, I took that wound and I really ran with it and I didn't learn how to, heal it or work it out, or I really ran with that negative idea and look at what it did to my life, or this belief limited me in this way. And so I think people do get to see that. And I don't understand the people who believe that there's no free will, because it looks like there's so much free will within a range,
Right.
within a range of like, here you are in this moment, there are all these things you could do. And I'm like, going to the moon might not be one of them, but these 3 doors, definitely.
Well, and that makes sense, because we hear about people having some sort of a rehabilitation. And if everything was planned out, and if that was definitely the role they were supposed to play, then how can we have them feel bad about it when they get back to heaven. So it seems like there's a mixture of some planning of maybe major events and then a lot of free will in between.
Yeah. And I think I've examined that in my own life years later, because I look at what the astrologers say. And lately, several really interesting astrologers have wanted to look at near-death experiencers like chart and see where the accident happened. And most of them say there's no way you were getting out of that without facing some childhood stuff or some type of accident, like that was, even if it was a broken leg, or, versus a back injury, like there was going to be something that was going to force me back home to see my mom and to kind of address letting go of some childhood wounds before I moved into that more adulthood.
When you've been connecting and learning more about what comes next for us, have you had any revelations of what people would consider a hellish experience?
What I've realized from interviewing Howard Storm and others is that there's always a way out of that. So, and that's the beauty. So always call on God. If you find yourself in a dark place, call on God. And that's what I tell the people here too. If you find yourself in a dark place, if you're truly frightened on a paranormal level, even, if there's a ghost or, a spirit, call Jesus, call God. There are no limits to that. So there's, we have the right to call on that light at any time.
And then there are some people that say, well, what you're really calling on is an angel of light, meaning Satan disguised as an angel of light.
Oh, that question. So, I would have to be dumber than a box of rocks to mistake God for the devil. And I think, the people, it's like they're gaslighting me. They don't know what either one of them is. So so I think what they're calling God, they're calling God the devil. They're the ones doing it. There's just some things your soul knows and knows with every fiber of your being. And to even say that, it doesn't make sense, because unfortunately, I look at people in the church, even some ministers, and they don't all have light. They're not all coming from a place of light. And so a lot of people who are listening to ministers preach fear and nothing but fear, and then they have this judgment and fear for near-death experiencers. Well, you're doing the exact opposite of what God said that I needed to show this world, which is don't have fear, have love for others. If you want to make more people into Christians, go out there and love on them. Don't get on the comment sections and hate them. Have something nice to say and something to add of value. And I think that would be the Christian way.
We forget that there can be flawed people out there that may have shared things that weren't true and weren't correct.
Yeah, and there can be people who are so scared that they need a very fundamentalist, cultish environment, that tells them they're superior in some ways to others. And there just are those personality types, and they need love too. I think the healing on the other side is your love too. So all this love that you're craving and trying to get through feeling superior to someone, you can just go to God and get that love.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too that there are so many loving people out there who are in a certain faith or not in a faith, and I think we're really trying to get at people that aren't necessarily living. They're not walking their talk.
Exactly. It's just social media. It's just, if you think about it, the 10% of people representing, certain populations are all on Twitter or all on YouTube, and they're just ruining it for everyone because all the nice people are out there just being nice.
Well, and I think people have lost the realization to be kind to somebody sometimes because they're used to getting on social media and having a bit of a argument with somebody and people will say things in comments, for example, that I thought, oh, I don't think they'd ever say that to somebody's face.
Oh, they
You know,
wouldn't.
the person on the other end has feelings. They're a human. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about this at the college level, and some of the nicest kids have told me that they're trolls, and I'm like, oh, you! I would never think that you'd be a troll.
You came back with a lot of intuitive gifts. Is that something that you still have? And how does that work in your life?
Yeah, so the intuitive gifts, the mediumship really developed with my father's death, and that's when different people started calling me and asking me if they lost a child. They said, please just try. Like, if you are a medium, you deserve to at least give it a shot. And it was so healing, like to feel parents change because of some of these messages. So I kept doing it, and that's been an interesting journey. But myself, I'm mostly concerned with healing. So I got certified in theta healing, which just made a lot of sense to me. We hold a lot of programs in our bodies, and so theta healing helps remove a lot of that, and it has helped me make shifts in certain areas. So there's all kind of modalities. It's just one, but I notice a lot of meditation teachers do use some of the wording from theta healing, because it is just quite nice. There's also I could go on and on, but the main thing is I just like to be of service. And so I just always say, hey, the highest good, may it come to me for this person, and we just see where it takes us.
You had this near-death experience, and you have a pretty strong connection, and you've developed that. For the average person, there's somebody out there that just got a really devastating diagnosis, or they're struggling with some sort of a condition. How valuable do you think visualization and meditation can be, and connecting to God and source and that energy to be able to heal and correct things?
Yeah, so correct things or accept things,
Yeah,
either
right.
way, it is a beautiful experience. And sometimes we are meant to die, and that's not a failure, and I kind of want to briefly address that, when someone dies, don't think that, they were less important, like the angels saved this person, but this person wasn't saved. It's, time is so irrelevant on the other side. So, death is just as much of a gift in some ways as being born. And Walt Whitman says this, and that's the way I see it too, in this realm. Could you repeat the question again? Because I wanted to throw that in, but.
So if somebody has an illness that they're trying to overcome or something, how does visualization and meditation work? Is that something that could help them on their path?
So it can sometimes. And that's what's absolutely amazing. And I think, certain people come to mind, with this. Certainly it's easier to switch things, at an earlier stage. But I knew a man who, used visualization, and this was his first, but he was like 100% certain it was work. There were no doubts in his mind, but he also took all this turmeric, and so, and did a fasting, other things with the diet. The tumor just went away. So, there are people who have really radically changed their diets and believe that what they're doing with visualization could make a huge effect on their body. And it does. Sometimes it may be too late to shift, or you're not being called in this moment to do that, to have a full turnaround. It's not a failure, though. I hate that idea of blaming people, for dying, or blaming people for not getting well. Like, they weren't spiritual enough? No. So look, near-death experiences teach us that when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And when it's not, it's not. You will have a near-death experience. You will get that miracle cure. But when it's your time, you're not avoiding that. Like, do you think you're going to just avoid it? So that's the better way to look at death, is it does come for us, and it's okay. It's not scary. It's beautiful. It's freeing. And in many ways, it's preferable to this body, and that's the thing that's kind of shocking, is it's preferable. Here we are holding on desperately to the meat suit. And then suddenly we're like, oh, we're smarter, better looking, we can fly. I mean, this is great.
And you address something too that I think some people struggle with, because, you'll hear somebody say they were in a car accident and, oh, it was divine intervention, I was saved. And then I always think, well, what about the people that weren't saved? So there's more to it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Gandhi and MLK and others who died young sometimes have just burned so bright in our minds. Like, we can't forget them, when someone dies in their 80s, 90s, 100s, you're like, well, they lived a good long life, but when someone dies young in the middle of their career, you're like, oh, they could have done so much more. And, they burn bright. So, how many musicians do we hold on to in our hearts forever because they died at 29 or 22? Yeah.
When we talk about your intuition, I heard you say that you can sometimes feel in advance when there's some sort of a societal upheaval. And I have had other near-death experiencers say, we're kind of headed into some rocky times, and we're getting kind of the point where it's past being able to change some of that. Do you have any kind of a sense of that?
What I do believe is that a lot of things are being brought to the surface and people are unhappy. My students are showing it. They want to learn how to garden. They want to learn how to grow fresh food. They want to work out. They care about the environment. There's a lot of young people are switching gears en masse, and they're open to meditation, and they are spiritual, not necessarily religious. So there's this whole population of young people who want to change things. And so I'm optimistic that things can change because of younger people, and maybe I've always had a heart of hope for that, but I think we will survive because of them. We will move into an easier time, more balanced with nature, where we're not working ourselves to death like machines, where, our productivity, just the whole idea of sucking the life out of human beings for the last dollar is going to change. And so, they're demanding that. And so, yeah, society's going to have to change. Who knows that time frame? We could see just the beginnings of structures hanging on and it crumbling. It could be massive. It could be instant. I mean, it could be an uphill battle with a lot of light. And I think that would be the best, is if, there's a lot that has to be challenged and changed, but there's so much good going in the direction of progress towards making this a better, equitable, light-filled, beautiful place, then maybe some of the struggle will be housed as worth it.
And if you're seeing some of these changes in them where they want to plant gardens and have more personal growth, could that be also the universe pushing them in that direction?
Yeah.
To prepare?
Yeah, that I think we are going to create futures where your local communities matter a lot more, especially, that's one way to combat technology, is just to be accountable to more and more people in your area and understand them and make a commitment to understand them and their safety. And, it was easier when we trusted some people. So I think, we have to learn to get back to that to some degree.
Yeah. Well, I have so enjoyed talking to you, and I know that my audience is loving listening to you. If they want to connect with you more, where can they listen to you? Where can they find your book? Do you have a website? All of that good stuff.
Oh yeah, so Tricia Barker, NDE, near death experience .com is my website. You can book an appointment with me. You can join my spiritual group, which meets twice a month, and I do group healings and meditations. Also help people sometimes with their writing. I get busy, but I'll occasionally work with someone who's writing a spiritual memoir, and my book's out there on Amazon, Audible, and regular. So.
And it's called Angels in the OR.
Yes.
And before we leave, do you have any, I don't know, words of wisdom or parting words that you can leave with the people that are listening?
Yeah, I don't claim to be, a guru or enlightened by any of these experiences. I'm just a regular person who's very aware of the energetic experience that I had and the effect it had on me and the effect it continues to have on me moving forward. And I know that we spread enlightenment by talking about these subjects. So I think it's important that you realize your potential and your psychic potential, your intuitive potential, or your potential just to move forward in the direction of your dreams without any, care in the world. Your intuition may be just this, full steam ahead into the direction of what you want. We're all individual, but go with light, go with love, and go with hope, and go with a hope to connect with others and to make the world better in some way. And I have all the faith in the world in all of us.
Well, thank you, Tricia. It has been an absolute delight to talk to you today. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
It was a real treat for me to talk to Tricia, and I hope that you appreciated listening to her as much as I did. I loved her enthusiasm, her joy, her wisdom. She brought so much back with her. So it was great hearing all of that. I love how she looks at her teaching and her interactions with her students, about how, considering that everybody who is put before us, there's a divine purpose in having them in our life, and how that changes our interaction when we look at life that way and we look at other people that way. So I thought that was a great lesson that she shared. It was also interesting to hear about her father and what his experience was, having gone past a near-death experience into actually staying there, and some of the things that he encountered. So those stood out to me, but I'd love to hear what stood out to you. What did you find intriguing? Please share that in the comments. If you prefer, just go ahead and let me know you made it. You can just type the words "made it" in the comments. I so appreciate that. And if you'd like to give it a like, that's always wonderful too. And if you haven't subscribed, I certainly hope you will. Just most of all, thank you so much for being here. I am so appreciative for each and every one of you. I truly am. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.